Assalamu alaikum, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you who are here today um, to another session of Live Q&A with Dr. Saleem. So the way this works is that you can ask questions in any language that you prefer, Urdu or English, and um, you can ask questions regarding Quran or Islam or any of these in general. And with that, um, Dr. Saleem's going to answer you, but the answer, however, is going to be in English, just so that we can reach a wider array of audience. So with that, we'll begin with our first question from Rafia Khwaja. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And if you can't find the button, let me know in chat and I'll help you put you in the queue. So Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, I want to ask you, yesterday I met a lady from Peru, and while I was talking to her, she said to me that she had lost her only son, 17 years old, in an accident, and a few years later she lost her husband. Oh. And she says, I cry every night for my son, but then I think he's in a better place. So I said to her, look, Doris, I think this life is a transit. Your destination, say, is Peru, and you are stopping in New York. And she said, oh, I love this statement from you. My question to you is that why is it, generally speaking, a lot of Muslims think that only Muslims will go to heaven? When you do meet people, I'm not very sure what is her religion. Obviously, she's not a Muslim. But, I'm fascinated, I'm abroad, how I find people thinking the same way, believing in the same God, believing in the hereafter. And yet we somehow, when I have discussions with different people from different religions, generally speaking, our Muslim attitude is only Muslims will get salvation. So I just wanted your views on this, because I was quite fascinated with the way the woman was talking.
Right. So unfortunately, this view has arisen by not understanding the context of certain Quranic verses and also some hadiths of the Prophet. So certain Quranic verses speak of the fact that the disbelievers will be consigned to hellfire. And then we have a hadith of the Prophet which say that he who says La ilaha illallah faqad dakhal al-jannah, only he will be entering paradise. So these are the things that have actually led most Muslims to believe that paradise is just a place for them, and even if they go to hell, they'll suffer some punishment in hell and they'll be taken out from hell and then be consigned to paradise. And as far as non-Muslims are concerned, they'll end up in hellfire or whatever they do. So the misconception has arisen by not understanding the word kafir or disbeliever as it is translated into English. So wherever this punishment is mentioned in the Quran, if you study the context, it is always about people who have intentionally denied a prophet of God, in spite of the fact that they were living in his times. He elaborated upon the truth to them in its ultimate form, and it was not out of any ignorance that they ultimately ended up denying him. It was because of sheer arrogance, and they fully knew that whoever they are facing is a prophet of God, but in spite of being convinced in their hearts, they denied him. And for such people, the word kafir was used by the Quran, and it was for such people that it was said that they'll end up in hellfire because they have deliberately denied. I mean, they know he's a prophet of God, and he still denied. They still deny, and so therefore these verses have a very specific context. So when you generalize these verses and we talk about disbelievers or kafirs of all times, it is here that the misconception arises. So today, people may be kafirs, they may be intentionally denying, but we have no means to point them out. And so today, people could be denying not only intentionally, but because there is an absence of a prophet of God. Because you see, the Almighty says that in the presence of a prophet of God, they are left with no excuse, because such is the ultimate way in which a prophet reveals the truth, that there's no one who can be left denying out of any excuse. But today, in the absence of any prophet of God, obviously this cannot be the case. So today, the right, correct name for such people would not be kafir. They should be called as non-Muslims. And so therefore, if we talk about such non-Muslims, and they have sincerely tried to find the truth. They have been sincere seekers of the truth, and then whatever their fate, we do. I mean, whatever the consequences or whatever the result that they've ended up with would not matter, hopefully, and God would reward them, because the quest for the truth today is the real thing. And wherever you ultimately end up after seeking the truth is besides the point, because to God, the thing which is of paramount importance in the non-prophetic period. So remember, we are talking about the prophetic period earlier on, in which people are left with no excuse but to, intentionally deny a prophet. But in the post-prophetic era, the era in which we are living, this excuse can always be there because of a lack of knowledge about the prophet, because of some disinformation, and at the same time because of what we Muslims do. This also might drive away non-Muslims from religion. So in the post-prophetic era, we have to understand that as far as people are concerned, yes, they have this responsibility to seek the truth. They cannot be careless in seeking the truth, and especially when they know that there is a group called Muslims who claim that they have the last book of God. So at least they have this responsibility to, to research this fact, and they can even deny the fact after researching it. But perhaps being careless about it or not even investigating it might land them in trouble. So I would sum up my answer by saying that this has arisen because of not understanding the punishment which is mentioned for disbelievers belong to the era of the prophets of God. As far as the hadith is concerned, which says the person who says La ilaha will enter Jannah, actually this has a very specific context, and that is again in the times of the Prophet, when people were persecuted, they were punished for not accepting for accepting religion. The Almighty just said through His Prophet that even if they now accept faith, in spite of this persecution, in spite of this punishment, mere acceptance of faith for them is sufficient to enter Jannah, because of course it was not said of the common man, it was said of people who wanted to enter the folds of Islam, but they were being persecuted. And for such people, it was quite obvious that when they will enter the folds of Islam by not just saying La ilaha, because La ilaha is just an expression of entering the folds of Islam, they would be very devout Muslims as well. So that narrative has to be explained in the light of this happening, or these circumstances in the times of the Prophet. And so therefore I would say that although it's an academic discussion, but then again, you see, this is a very common and a popular misconception amongst Muslims, and it can only be driven out of their minds or dealt with them once we are able to explain this context. Either someone can do it for you, or you can refer him to someone, that person, or maybe to a book. But this background has to be understood. And as far as your friend is concerned, if she's a seeker of the truth, she's a very sincere seeker of the truth, we do hope, inshallah, that God will treat her with great lenience.
But Dr. Shehzad, she did believe there's a life after death. She believed in God because she said, my son is with God and he's in a better place. But all you refer to is for people at the time of the Prophet, these non-Muslims who disbelieved in the Prophet. But we somehow apply it to every person living today. That is a problem.
That is the problem.
Shukriya bahut.
Our next question is from Muhammad Hamza. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My question to Dr. Shehzad is that Allah challenges the non-Muslim that if you can bring only one verse like this in Quran. So regarding this question, I want to know that in what scenario and in what sense and with what those unique characteristics of the verses of Quran about which Allah is challenging the non-Muslim.
Actually, this challenge of the Quran has generally been misunderstood. So this challenge has been mentioned on three occasions in the Quran. And on the first occasion in Surah Baqarah, it says, "Fa'tu bi suratim mithlihi," which means that bring a surah like this. And people have generally understood this challenge to mean that some surah which is similar to this, some Arabic composition which is like the Quran, or something which replicates the Quran. So It's like people have understood that the Quran cannot be imitated. And of course, this is not what the Quran is actually saying, because people can bring up verses of the Quran. I mean, they can concoct verses and say, well, look at the eloquence of this verse, and it is quite near the Quran. So the challenge is not that you bring something which is of the Quran, I mean, of the type of the Quran. It says mimithlihi, something which is like it. In other words, the challenge is that you bring some other composition which is not, I mean, imitating the Quran, but an original composition which has the same eloquence, which has the same way in which God speaks and human beings don't speak. So you see, one of the things which plagues human compositions and human books is that generally human beings pass through evolution in their ideas. They would be believing in one thing in the beginning of their career as a researcher, and then as they move ahead in life, they change their stance, they improve on their reasoning, and they publish various editions of their works, which you can see in the life of every single human being. So people as brilliant as Einstein or Socrates or Karl Marx or Michael Popper, all these things, Karl Popper, all these people were people who went through an evolution. And as far as the human composition is concerned, it always passes through this evolution. So the challenge actually was to bring something which is not the Quran, something different, some other genre, which has the same ability in it, the same characteristic in it. Like, for example, it does not have indiscrepancy. One of the biggest things which the Quran talks about is that there is no discrepancy and there's no evolution. Whatever was said, let's say on day one, was maintained and accepted until the very last day. So simply, it is beyond any evolution. It is a timeless masterpiece. So human compositions, human works are not timeless. They cannot stand the test of time. They might survive maybe for 50 years or 100 years. Then they have various challenges. For example, the information mentioned at times is not correct and it is revised. At times, whatever is said is not, I mean, fully understood, and not only in its philosophical way, but also in its practical way. At other times, as I said, it goes through an evolution. So the comparison basically, or the challenge basically, is to bring something which is similar to the Quran, not an imitation of the Quran, which has the same characteristics, and the characteristics are that it should not evolve over a period of time as human thought does even in a single human being, and there should be no discrepancy in what is produced, and also should not be challenged. It's the information mentioned should not be challenged by any new information that comes up and actually renders that research or that book as redundant because new facts have come up. So these are some of the characteristics which the Quran mentions. But as I said, most people have actually tried to produce something, a surah like it, and what they have ended up is like imitating the Quran. So we have this famous verse of the Quran being imitated as al-fil mal-fil wa ma adraka mal-fil. It's like al-qariya mal-qariya wa ma adraka mal-qariya. Al-fil in Arabic means elephant. So the concoctor says that, look, I produced something very similar to the Quran, and I say elephant. What is the elephant, and what do you know what the elephant is? On the lines of al-qariya, without realizing that the challenge, as I repeatedly have just said, is not that you have to produce something like that. I mean, you have not been asked to imitate the Quran. It's not imitation. It has to be something original in a way that the discrepancies, the flaws which plague human works should not be plagued whatever you produce in those works, so that it is an original piece of work without discrepancies, cannot be challenged through various new piece of information that emerge. So this is how I understand it.
So, got it, sir. Thank you.
Hudayfa, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
आपसे ये सवाल है कि उस दिन मुझे कुरान पढ़ने का इत्तेफाक हुआ तो उसमें कुर्बानी का वाक़या, तो हजरत इस्माइल की हजरत इस्माइल की जगह हजरत इसहाक का लिखा हुआ था। तो मेरा एक सवाल था कि अगर मैं गलत हूँ तो मेरी इस्लाह कीजिएगा। ये हजरत इसहाक थे कि हजरत इस्माइल थे? तो मुझे तो हदीसों किताबों में सुनने को मिला है हजरत इस्माइल। और दूसरा मेरा ये सवाल था कि अगर हम लोग कुर्बानी तो हजरत इब्राहिम अलैहिस्सलाम के दौर से है, तो ये ईसाई, ये ज्यूज और क्रिश्चियंस क्यों नहीं कुर्बानी करते? Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely right that in the Torah it is written that the son who was offered for sacrifice was Isaac, Ishaq, and not Ishmael. So this is what the Jewish scriptures say, that the Torah says, and this is one of the very blatant examples of interpolation or tahrif in the Torah, because from the Quran we clearly know that the son who was sacrificed or was offered for sacrifice was the only son, and the Bible acknowledges that the term only son, you see the words which are written in the Bible is that you have to your only son. And because Ismail was older to Isaac, so this could not have been applied to Isaac, because Isaac was born 14 years after Ismail. And the term only son could have only been applied to Ismail, because that was the time, or that was the era in which Ismail was the only son and Isaac was yet to be born. And the Bible says that you should sacrifice your only son. So clearly from the Bible itself, we can see from its own insinuations that Isaac was not the son to be sacrificed, or offered for sacrifice. It was actually Ishmael. And there's this interpolation has taken place. And the reason for this interpolation was that the Jews did not want a new prophet from the Ishmaelites. They wanted from the Israelites, and they wanted to cut off the relationship of Abraham with the Ishmaelites. And so for this, they actually changed the Bible at this place and placed the name of Isaac instead of Ishmael. But as I said, even from the Bible itself, you can clearly see that it could not have been Isaac, because Isaac was not the only son, because he was younger to Ishmael. And when Isaac been proposed to be sacrificed, he could not have been called the only son, because Ishmael was already present with him. He was older to him, and this is what the Bible also says. So the term only son, which is mentioned in the Bible, can only be applied to Ishmael, because he was 14 years older to Isaac, as the Bible also says. And the term only son can only be applied to him because he was there before Isaac. And the term, if you use the words Isaac, you could not have said the only son, because as I said, Ishmael was older to him. And had Isaac been told to be sacrificed, he could not have been called the only son, because Ishmael was already there before him. So these are some of the pointers from within the Bible which tell us that it has been a grave interpolation on their part. Now, as far as your second question is concerned regarding animal sacrifice. So animal sacrifice, or Eid, or the Eid al-Azha, on which we can commemorate the sacrifice which was offered by Abraham, is something which started off with Prophet Muhammad. So this was a ritual, or the ritual of Eid is one of those sunnahs which were initiated by Prophet Muhammad himself. It did not take place before Prophet Muhammad. It was a commemoration of that sacrifice initiated by Prophet Muhammad himself.
Moving on, one of the questions asked, I am watching pornography from several days. I was continuing performing prayers from several years, but then I got disinterested. And several months ago, although I'm not performing prayers but on a daily basis, but I don't feel peace of heart. How can I overcome myself?
So, first of all, we have to understand is that we are all human beings. We make errors, we make omissions, and as long as we are ashamed of something bad that we do, as long as we are embarrassed before God, this is the only way out, that we keep ourselves in check by giving weight to this embarrassment and the shame that we have. It means that there is still faith, there is belief left in us, because in the absence of this shame which we might have, it would mean that we have lost any shred of faith that we might have. So first of all, value this feeling of guilt. If you feel that guilt, it is something which if you continue to have, it will bring you closer to God. So what you need to do perhaps is that concentrate on some of the positive activities of life, in which, of course, never give up on yourself, never think that you are good for nothing. These are lures and attractions of Satan, and because they are a click away these days, easily available, so a lot of people succumb to them. But look what God Almighty has said to us, and He has said that if you do something in frenzy, And as soon as you come out of it, as soon as you realize that you have done something wrong and you immediately repent, God says that it is incumbent upon me that I'll forgive such a person. So even if you fall into this trap every day, immediately repent right after that, make this commitment that you're not going to repeat it as far as possible. And even if you repeat it over and over again, still still continue to repent and make this commitment that the next day you'll not do it, even if you do it, because this is something which will just keep you attached with God, and you never know, one day you will have the power and the strength to actually totally give it up. And some of the other things that might help you in this regard is that set yourself a purpose in life, set yourself an aim in life. You see, pornography or things which lead us to such extremes, they are generally they generally find themselves in our life when we don't have a purpose or mission in life. What happens is that we have a lot of vacant time, and so therefore this time is used in such activities. So if you have a mission in life, you have a purpose in life, use that mission and purpose in life to contribute to the society that you live in, for the betterment of humanity, so that you do your best in this regard. And once you have a focused life, you'll find yourself that focus makes you go towards that focus more than it makes you go astray. The second thing is that in this regard, one of the things that really can help all of us is that to build something which is equally attractive to things that Satan leads us to, like, for example, pornography. So one of the things that I always feel is very attractive, at least in the worldly plane, is to do something creative in life. So not only contributing in life, but doing some creative things. Like, for example, it could be art, it could be some of your hobbies that you have, it could be, creating anything, any form of substance that you could create. So creativity is something which really attracts us, which really gives us that fulfillment. And the more we are attracted towards that creativity in our own selves, the more we'll find ourselves trying to do that. And then, of course, it goes without saying that we must have a strong God connection. And that strong God connection, again, has a lot to do with the way we study the Quran. If we're able to find time to have some time between ourselves and God in seclusion, in which we can read what He says, understand. And of course, then if we are offering the prayers, we should make it a point that we are able to understand what we are saying in the prayer, and not just uttering something without understanding it, because that is not going to have that effect on ourselves. So when we pray, it should be like we are trying to talk to God, at least trying to understand what we are doing, what we are saying. And above all, we have to remember that this life is a test. And one of the biggest tests which the Almighty had actually warned us at the creation of Adam and Eve was this test through sexual impulses. So it was exactly this which Satan had led Adam to do, and God had actually stopped him from doing so. So telling us that one of the biggest ways in which all of us will be tested is through this sexual impulse and sexual desire. And of course, this is something which could lead us to extremes. So I think if we understand all these points, instill creativity in ourselves, build ourselves on a positive footing, have an aim in life. At the same time, whenever we fall to prey to pornography or things that are similar, we immediately, as soon as we realize, we come out of it, we repent to God, and try our best not to do it again. And finally, as I said earlier on, never giving up on ourselves, because you see, when we do something wrong, one of the biggest weapons of Satan is that he makes you lose hope in yourself, and he says that you're good for nothing. You make a commitment every day, and every day you break it. So never give up on yourselves. Always be that positive person who says that I'm going to try again and continue to try again and not give up on myself. And this is why I would suggest that even if you don't find your prayer to be very absorbing or involving, do continue, because you see, this is something which is it's like a barrier between such things, and you never know when that barrier really works. So in spite of thinking that this is a big test, this is something I have to really work for, do think that this is one area which is the strongest, in which we all can fall prey to, But then this is where we are being tried and tested, and we have to try our best. So trying the most that you can, trying as best as you can, is what is needed. And even if you succumb to the lures of Satan, just continue to try your best.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have another 20 minutes remaining and a bunch of more questions, so I would like to request all the participants to limit themselves to one question. And in the second round of questions, if we still have time, then you can ask another question. Adil Qureshi, please go ahead.
Ji, Dr.
Walaikum assalam.
So, sir, the ayah that we read earlier, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. So the start of the ayah is actually كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ.
Yes.
So it looks like the context of the ayah was actually the fact that these gentlemen were asked to do qital and they did not want to get themselves involved in qital. Now, the lessons that you extracted from the ayah obviously are wonderful, but that sort of makes me wonder if the context of the ayah was under the context of qital, and then we have found that to be a sort of a lesson that should belong to every walk of the life. How does one find out that in this particular context, this ayah had a very limited context and it was only meant for that context? And how do you, in other cases, generalize this to the whole life matter?
So you see, this is a very good question. If you study the Quran in totality, not at just one place, you'll realize that this is not confined to qital as the context here suggests. So, for instance, look at the incident of Moses and Khizr. You can clearly see that things happen against our will, against our expectation. And the Almighty actually lifts the veil behind those incidents. And each time He tells us, whether it was the case of the ship, or the case of the boy being killed, or the case of that wall being redone by Moses, that all these things, they were happened in a way that we thought that all of us, I mean, on the human plane, thought that they're going to be bad for us, but ultimately some good was hidden. So if we interpret this in the light of the rest of the Quran, and also, I mean, something which we can vouch for is our own experience. That I mean, this is a verse which is talking about things which are not just we just don't hold good for qital or fighting, as the context says. They hold good for everything, whatever we do, whatever the circumstances are. So I would say the nature of the word themselves and some of the other verses of the Quran clearly indicate that we cannot just confine this verse to the qital context, and it can be extended for all things.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Noshad Shafqa. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. That's why, from the descendants of Abraham, most of the prophets after him, in fact, all prophets except the last one, came from the children of Isaac. And another interrelated question is that why did the punishment, the Qayamat-e-Sughra, as they say, occur from at the hands of the companions of the Prophet, and with respect to other prophets, it was always something which had to do with nature? Thank you.
So, as far as your first question is concerned, what was your first question?
Sir, my first question was with regard to why was only
Prophethood,
Muhammad from the children of Isaac.
So actually, what we can see in hindsight and what we can see from Prophet Abraham's supplication that he made was that there would be a last prophet sent from the Ishmaelites, and so therefore every single prophet of almost all the prophets which preceded him predicted his arrival, and the Almighty through his prophet Abraham had said that the last prophet would be from the Ishmaelites. So it was a test for the Israelites, and that for a whole period of time, for almost 2,000 years, prophethood would be confined to their descendants and their progeny, but then the last prophet would come from their cousins, or so to speak, Isaac's brother Ishmael, and on him prophethood would end. So this was a prediction and a prophecy and a dua which had been made by Prophet Abraham himself. And so, I mean, the reason, of course, would be that he wanted to bless both branches of his descendants with prophethood, but he wanted the Ishmaelites to be the ones who have the last prophet arisen among them. The other important thing is that the Israelites, or the descendants of Isaac, they also did not fulfill the responsibility of Shahada, which means delivering the truths to the rest of the people, and also not following the commandments of God. So we know in the times of Moses, we know in the time of many other Israelite prophets, they really did not come up to the mark, and they even went after killing the last prophet of Israelite, Jesus. They tried to crucify him. So this is something which happened in the times of the Israelite prophets, and so therefore they were also deposed from this position of Shahada because of their misconduct. And at the same time, since the Almighty had already ordained Prophet Abraham that the last prophet would come from the other branch of Abraham's children, so therefore this was done. And one thing also that might help you in understanding the scheme of God is that He actually made two centers of monotheism in His own time. So one was Palestine and the other one was Arabia. So the Palestine was, the first center was actually Palestine, and you can see that Abraham and his progeny through Isaac, they were made to settle there, and they were given this responsibility of delivering the truth. And ultimately, when they faltered and they could not continue, that responsibility was given to the other center of Tawheed, which was then established, although established very earlier on in the time of Ishmael. But because of the fact that between Ishmael and Prophet Muhammad, there was no prophet of God. So the Quraysh, or the Ishmaelites who lived in Arabia in those times, they got corrupted and they got incriminated with polytheism in spite of starting with monotheism. And so therefore the last prophet was sent to them so that they could also reform themselves. And at the same time, as I said earlier on, the supplication of Abraham made in favor of the last prophet is also fulfilled.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
मेरा थोड़ा सा क्वेश्चन है कि अबाउट men wearing gold, अगर छोटी मोटी कोई अंगूठी में थोड़ा सा सोना है या किसी चीज में, तो उसकी वो कुरान पाक में तो नहीं है, मुझे पता है हदीस में है, लेकिन या इसकी कई लोग कहते हैं कि जी उस वक्त पाबंदी थी जब औरतों कुछ नहीं पहने देते थे, खुद ही सारा कुछ पहन लेते थे। आजकल तो अगर मतलब एक अंगूठी में थोड़ी सी गोल्ड है या किसी और चीज में तो पहना हुआ था, उसमें क्या है, वे लोग घर में पहनते हैं।
So actually, you see, as you rightly said, prohibition of gold is not mentioned in the Quran anyway. It's basically an application which was done by Prophet Muhammad, and the directive which is actually mentioned in the Quran is that do not be exorbitant in your expenditure, do not do israf, do not overspend. So the Quran actually tells us that overspending and exorbitance is forbidden, and in compliance with the Quran's directive, the Prophet himself said that gold is something which is forbidden, should be forbidden for both men and women, because it is something which is actually it represents that exorbitance, and it is something which you can only buy after spending a lot of money. So for women, actually, some exception was given because for their natural inclination to beautify themselves, they were given this exception. But for men, this was not done so. So basically, anything which is exorbitant, which results, in the fact that you obtain it through overspending or spending a lot, is something which is prohibited. Now, today, this is something that we have to reassess whether gold is still a metal which has the same status as it held in the times of Prophet Muhammad. So this is a question that each one of us would ask our own selves and be the best judge, because the real directive is not to overspend or spend on things which become status symbols, or spend on things which are which, as I said, are exorbitant. So exorbitance and overspending is something which the Quran mentions. In the times of the Prophet, gold was one of those things. So today, or maybe in later times, or even times after the Prophet, this application has to be continued to reviewed, because, for example, today, we have things like platinum. We might have things like mink coats, which are supremely expensive. So it could be the fact that exorbitance and that overspending is something which we have come out of as far as gold is concerned. But that is something that I would say that we should all see once again. All that I can say is that this is what the principle which the Quran has taught us, and the Prophet has applied that principle in his own times, and that is something that we need to continually apply and see if gold still holds the same status, then yes, we should avoid it. And if it does not, then of course we can use it to some extent.
Thank you. Well, we have just ladies, some ladies, they will wear diamond, or it's not gold. Or some bande they wear diamond earring, but it's not gold.
Yeah, diamond or platinum, or there are other forms of jewelry which are even more expensive than gold. So it's not that gold is something which is prohibited. But as I said repeatedly, what the Quran says, that you must not spend on things which can become a means of show off, and you buy things which are very expensive, because then you would be actually doing something which the Almighty does not want you to do. He wants you to be a person who is moderate in his or her expensive and lifestyle. So basically what the Almighty wants us to have, that moderation in our lifestyle, and avoid that immoderation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have 10 minutes and a bunch of written questions, so I'm going to try to zoom through them as much as we can. The first one asks that Ghamidi Sahib says that in Bible is strictly a monotheistic book, and the message hasn't changed, but NIV Proverb 8:22 and John 1:2, 8:48-59 suggest that Solomon or Jesus were present beside God in the beginning. God created universe from Jesus, and Jesus came before Ibrahim. Can you please explain this contradiction?
Well, you need to have those verses before me so that I could explain those contradictions. But one thing is that something is, which is what we call is established history. So you just cannot deny established history. Established history means that every such a large chunk of people transmit a piece of information about which it cannot be claimed that they have all colluded on falsehood. So this is what we call generation to generation transfer. So, like for example, the fact that there was a person called Socrates, or there was a person called let's say Abraham Lincoln, who we never saw, and we know that he existed in history. So on very similar grounds, established history tells us that Jesus came much after Prophet Abraham. The Quran itself is a book of history. I mean, it's also a book of history. It clearly tells us about a lot of historical facts. So if the person who is asking this question does believe in the Quran as well, then as a document of history also, you can clearly see from the Quran that it tells us that Jesus was a prophet who was sent just before Prophet Muhammad in order to pave his way and to give glad tidings of his arrival. And it was much before him, almost 2,000 years before him, that Abraham had been sent. So I'm not sure who the questioner is. If he's, he's a Muslim, then I would refer him to the Quran. And he's not a Muslim, then he should refer to established history. And established history is something which tells us that Abraham was much before Jesus.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, in Quran, it's mentioned that God managed the matter of creating the world in 1,000 years. How do you respond to the question that if God is so powerful, why couldn't he do this in seconds?
He has mentioned this elsewhere as well, and he said that he has created this earth in a gradual way, and that gradual way is meant to tell us that there is some elaborate arrangement which God has made for us. Had he wanted to do something immediately, he could have done it. But doing something in a gradual way conveys this message that he has a certain plan for it. Why would he delay doing something which he could have done immediately? Yes, he had the power to do it immediately, but he made it go through pass through various phases to tell us that, well, there is a way to everything, and there is a method to everything. And just as this world has been created in a gradual way, look at human beings. They also are created in a gradual way. It takes a lot of time for a single human being to come out from the womb of a mother, like, for example, 9 months. He could have done that immediately. So this law of gradual progression is found everywhere wherever God's creativity is, signaling us that we also are gradually moving back towards him to be answerable to him. As far as he is concerned, he could have done everything in the wink of an eye, but he wants us to be given that time so that we reflect on things around us. We reflect on how he painstakingly makes things in a way that they grow, they gradually progress, which tells us that he is a person, or he's a being who has created things for a purpose. And that purpose is something that he wants us to deduce from all this happening. And that is why it says that it has created this earth in 6 stages, which is often interpreted as 6 days. So since the days of God are not the same as the days that we are used to, so it's like saying that the earth was created, or the universe was created in 6 stages, implying the fact that the Almighty has given a lot of thought to this. It's like a programmed thing. It's like a thing in which there is a plan to it, there's a method to it, there's a purpose to it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. What can a person do if they believe in God logically but cannot find the connection to Him even in prayers or umrah?
So that is, I mean, the best thing in the for this end to be achieved is that you just look around the world and see how everything has been given to you as a blessing. Look at your own body, look at your eyes, look at your ears, look at your normal body function, look at the internal organs that you have been blessed with, look at the mind and the intellect that you have been blessed with. So you can relate to God by relating all these things that you have got as His blessings. Look at your parents, look at the surroundings, look at the sun, the moon, the stars, the providence around you. So you can connect to God by actually assessing the fact that your God connection is based on acknowledging His favors on you. The blessings that He has are so numerous. And just think of being deprived of any of these blessings. For example, think if you were not able to walk or talk or hear or listen and even see. And so think of the fact that every particle or every object of this universe has been created to serve mankind. For example, the sun does not serve its own purpose. It shines for ourselves, for our benefit. Similar is the case with the wind, the mountains, the moon, and all these elements of nature. So when you connect yourself to God, you connect yourself to Him through these favors and blessings, and always realize that you were not entitled to them, but you have been given them. I mean, you did not do something to deserve them, but they are a gift of a supreme creator. So when you realize that all these things have been given to you as a gift, your immediate reaction would be to thank Him, to acknowledge Him, and to come closer to Him.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Do you have a step-by-step guide on teaching Quranic lessons to kids as a parent?
Well, actually, there is a book which I've written, which should be available, I mean, somewhere. It's called A Beginner's Guide to the Quran. So this is precisely for the purpose of introducing the Quran first to our young minds before they are made to read the Quran, so that they can have a background of the Quran, what exactly are the features of the Quran, the content of the Quran. And then there's another book which I would recommend, which I have also authored, and it's called Selections from the Quran. So before even plunging into the Quran, because it's a big book, it's always good to expose young minds to a selection of the verses of the Quran. So these are the two books that you'll find. They should be at Amazon maybe, or I mean, someone can refer you. Some of our people here might tell you where they are, but they are available at various instances. So once they are through with these, with this selection part and the beginner's guide, it is then that we suggest that the child or the young mind can be made to go through the Quran in a sequential way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Since we're almost out of time, we have time for one more question, and then we'll be ending this session, inshallah. So this question asks, can a Muslim woman who likes a married Hindu man, and the Hindu's man's life with his wife isn't good, and he also likes the Muslim woman, but doesn't want to become a Muslim, can they be friends?
Can they be friends, or can they get married?
The question asks if they can be friends.
I mean, you can be friend to anyone. As long as you maintain your decorum and decency, there's nothing which can stop you. But to me, the context does seem that if the person doesn't like wife, it does mean they could go. So you see, if the question is regarding marriage, then we need to understand that one of the most important things which should be important to all of us as creatures of God is the concept of monotheism. So God says that monotheism is something which should play a very important role in our lives. So if we are monotheistic, then I mean, our choices should also revolve around monotheism. And we do know that Hindus have a different concept regarding monotheism. So I mean, as long as monotheism has that importance in your life, you will be governed by the choices with a view that you give it more preference. But of course, if this is something which is not in your not even in your preference, then then of course, what else can be said that except, okay, do what you want?
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We are just on time. We still have a few questions, and I would request these people to please bring them forth next time, or post them in our WhatsApp group, and inshallah we'll get to them next week. Until then, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.